about women. When women get liberated, then they start becoming lesbians and practicing witchcraft and, all that.
From the New York Times, once again.
Magic the Gathering is steeped in the hidden language, imagery, signs, and rites of at least 30 satanic cults in this country, Mrs. DeBari said. Moreover, it is a codification of the beliefs, practices, and perceptions of the new Satanists of today. There are inducements in Magic the Gathering to engage in destructive, cruel cult practices.
So, where is all this black magic? Perhaps Seal Denozzi and Marianne DeBari were looking at Burnt Offering, a spooky image of a wicker man engulfed in flames that recalled another witchy cult film from 1973. They certainly would have seen Dark Ritual, which, as the name suggests, meant that playing magic was itself a ceremony. Cards like Lord of the Pit and Nettling Imp struck a nerve for their, quote,
lurid depictions of demons,
end quote. Sacrifice also appeared in the lawsuit many times and honestly stood no chance in the eyes of these parents. And of course, the witchcraft depicted on cards like Leshrac Sigil and Circle of Protection Blue were further proof of Wizards of the Coast's subliminal messaging. There's that pesky pentacle again. In browsing all of the cards printed up until 1995, I found more and more examples of the same imagery and themes targeted by the Satanic Panic. So many of these cards could have doubled as album artwork for the metal bands who were being taken to court for backmasking lyrics. Even the more nonchalant cards like Fumarole and Energy Storm had a dark, unnerving quality to them.
My name is Eric Landis. I've been a Magic player off and on since the beginning.
I wanted to talk to my friend Eric Landis for two reasons. The first, he was playing Dungeons & Dragons throughout the years of the Satanic Panic, and subsequently found magic in an enchantingly cool way.
Peter Atkinson was my GM before he founded Wizards of the Coast. We had role-played when I was in college. After I left college, I started working at Microsoft, and one day I just got this packet in the mail, and it was an alpha starter box and 2 beta booster packs. And he's like, hey, we've got this new game, check it out. In middle school and high school, we played AD&D first edition. Yeah, there was definitely a stigma. I distinctly remember a conversation with my mother. I was brought up Catholic. She was an administrative assistant and organist in the church. So the Catholic Church was an integral part of our family life. I had been playing D&D with some friends. This would have been around 79, 80. And she asked me, what do you do when you play? She just, she wanted it from me. She wanted me to describe what our game sessions were like, because the fear going around at the time, you're conjuring demons and you're casting spells. You're actually doing this stuff. And I explained to her, it's cooperative storytelling is what it is. This was probably an hour conversation. And she's like, okay, I believe you. And that was the last I heard of it. That was a direct result of what was going on with the Satanic Panic and her perception being kind of a church insider of sorts, where she just needed to know.
I also wanted to ask about his role as a parent to 2 kids who took interest in magic very young.
We were packing to move, and I still had some of my old cards and boxes in the garage. And so I was going through them to see if there was anything worth selling. And both my kids, in fact, my daughter was more interested than Jack was at first. So I put together a mono red deck and a mono green deck, and they just took to it.
Eric told me that he never had any preoccupations with showing his youngsters that witchy old card game. In fact, the early exposure to magic left quite a devilish impression on Eric's son, Jack.
He was 7 when he started playing. To this day, Desecration Demon is his favorite card.
How real is devil worship? Well, that's what my next guests will inform us. First, we have Dark Lord Blood.
Those 2 parents in New York weren't the only ones afraid of magic in 1995. Peter Atkinson and his small team at Wizards of the Coast were also apprehensive of the game's gigantic success, in a sort of Frankenstein's monster type of way. They knew that the lawsuit against the Bedford School District could put magic in the crosshairs of television talk shows and ruin the company before it could fully find its footing. Furthermore, Wizards had not yet purchased Dungeons & Dragons from TSR. That would come 2 years later in 1997. But if another satanic panic took over the country against these witchy and demonic trading cards, then certainly that would have marked the death of a business venture. so they nipped the fear in the bud with two tangible changes. The first was an aesthetic one. That inverted pentacle behind Unholy Strength was erased for its 4th edition printing, creating an incoherence between art and flavor. As a result, the 5th edition version of Unholy Strength received new artwork entirely and has never returned to Schuller's original depiction since. The second change was relatively minor, but it marked a shift in philosophy for world building and the Magic brand. In 1995, the team removed demons from the game and replaced them with a more neutral creature type in horror. It was a small camouflage that, hopefully, could keep the worried parents at bay. Video games would soon enough do the heavy lifting in that regard. But to me, this change had ripple effects that we still feel in Magic today. Looking at the expansion starting in 1996, you get the sense that Magic had found its identity in high fantasy and began to move away from world history as a source for storytelling. The Weatherlight crew would soon arrive and give shape to the game's first big heroes and villains, marking them by name on their own cards and in the pages of their own novels. Their popularity would lay the conceptual framework for Planeswalkers, which, alongside traveling to new worlds every year, became the most defining feature of the brand. Now, with the omnipresence of comic book heroes in media and new Marvel movies every year, the zeitgeist has fully embraced superheroes as a cultural staple. These interests used to belong only to nerd culture, and now they're the pillars of the mainstream. Magic sits in this space. It is the culture. But in 1995, Magic was still decidedly counterculture. It was heavy metal. It was witchcraft. And it was scary. Much of Pegaloy's research is concerned with the depictions of witches and the occult in popular media. So I wanted to hear her thoughts on some early Magic cards that exist in this space and illustrate some of her own personal practices.
I absolutely love incense. In fact, I used to work at an occult shop in Boston where we sold a lot of ingredients for making incense. I sold my own line of it at festivals for a while. I actually started writing a book about witchcraft and incense. I think that when you see a representation of it in film or TV, there's this smoke having a physical look to it. So if you choose ingredients that create that thick smoke, that can be kind of cool. But it's not just that it looks interesting. It's that one thing you can do with that smoke is you can visualize magical intention. It's sort of like scrying, where you use a crystal ball or a dark mirror or a bowl of water. Smoke is also a surface upon which you can visualize something, or you can project your intention or imprint your intention upon it.
Karma is another card that has historical resonance not just in East Asian religions, but also in the Wiccan rule of 3, which is a principle that states that whatever energy you put into the world will return to you threefold. This goes for both beneficial magic and hexes.
I love the almost a vibe of one of these kind of old hag witches that lives, by the edge of the forest. The purple, of course, that's a semiotic signpost that says this person's a witch or a wizard. The color purple is associated with magic and the occult. Frequently it's also associated with death and royalty. So we do see this color purple associated with witches a lot.
And returning to that pesky pentacle once more.
So back in the 80s when, where people were